Islamic culture would misquote the Quran, and they're financed by the same guys. Remember, Osama bin Laden is a yuppie punk, equivalent to Jamie Dimon. He is the Jamie Dimon of Islamic extremism, and Jamie Dimon is the Osama bin Laden of market fundamentalism. These two are the two sides of the same coin, except Jamie Dimon's a lot worse. He's a lot more dangerous. He does a lot more damage, and therefore crushing the stock of J.P. Morgan by buying silver is really a great way to restore some kind of economic balance in the system. And, I'm not on the left. I'm not on the right. I'm in the middle. I'm just a market maker myself. It's kind of an ideological market maker. And what I've observed is that the left refuses to fight on a level playing field. They're constantly selling themselves short. They're constantly think that by being a mamby-pamby, wishy-washy, hope, and change is going to do anything. They need to understand the fight before they can enter the fight. They have to understand who they're fighting against. So Michael Moore does not do a good description in describing who the people are fighting against. He's, again, just taking kind of lackadaisical pot shots from the sidelines. He's not actually in the fight. What I'm trying to do is just bring together these two opponents to see who's going to really win this battle, but both have to be in the same weight class. You can't have a flyweight left liberal go to battle against Mike Tyson. It's not a fair fight. It's not an interesting fight. And it's I think at least before we all disappear prematurely due to other imbalances in the economy that show up in terms of environmental problems, at least we should have at least one good fight before the end.
Now, economist Michel Chossudovsky said on my show that poverty was the result of macroeconomic policy. Would you agree with that? And what do you think it's going to take? It looks like the bankers are going to take this to ashes. I mean, what is it going to take to turn things around? What kind of a system do we need?
Well, I would agree in that macroeconomics would be the pushing down from above of some scheme economically that it puts an advantage for the small group of very wealthy and a disadvantage the poor. Now, you see a good example of this all the time. All you need to do is read any newspaper, and you'll see a headline that will say something like, Bernanke is concerned about joblessness, and it will not raise interest rates anytime soon. He fears, quote-unquote, deflation. Now, let's break that down for a second, and you'll understand what that quote about macroeconomics is all about, which I agree with. Bernanke always sees deflation because that's his role in the economy as an academic, Ivy League-trained academic, an Ivy League school endowed by that top 1%. He always sees deflation, and his response would always be to create more money and ease monetary policy. That money never goes into the real economy. It goes through the banking system directly into the pockets of the bank's top 1% clients who buy assets, stocks, bonds, and commodities. And those people, the top 1%, always see inflation. So while Bernanke talks about deflation and responds with a policy initiative, what he does is he's creating inflation for the top 1% who are the beneficiaries of all the monetary policy of money that's entering the system, which has the effect of a twofold effect. Number one, it debases the currency in a way that constantly keeps the interest rates on that money low, keeps the value of the money low so that wages are continuously debased and the purchasing power is debased. So the wage class and the bottom 99% is constantly being attacked by this currency, is constantly debasing their purchasing power, and it constantly, as a result, interest rates are always kept artificially low. This way, the savers never get more than 0.5% on their savings. Pensioners never get more than 0.5% on their pensions. So again, this puts enormous pressure on anyone who's trying to save money or work for a living, while simultaneously putting enormous profits into the pockets of those who are buying assets, stocks, bonds, and commodities. Now, because stocks, bonds, and commodities are going up due to the misperception that is talked about by Bernanke of deflation, it also drags up with it agricultural and energy prices. So that same group of people that is caught in the middle, the bottom 99%, not only are they not getting any return on their savings, and not only are they not getting any wage increases, but the price of their food and energy is going up simultaneously. So they experience stagflation. So you have the three inflations operating simultaneously. You've got Bernanke, who sees deflation. You've got the top 1% who are experiencing inflation and wealth aggregation, and the bottom 99% who are experiencing stagflation. And it's set up this way on purpose to make the top 1% increasingly wealthy. And it's a macroeconomic policy, as the quote suggests. And it's done on purpose, and it's done on a global basis. And the results are clear. The wealth and income gaps in the U.S. have never been wider, and this is happening all over the world. In these economies that have embraced this style of doing business, central banks pursuing this line, and the results are the same. And the results are also similar in that you've got now social unrest. In many countries of the world, it's growing every single day, and the anger and the violence is growing as a result of this institutionalized macroeconomic policy designed to bankrupt the bottom 99% and to reinstitute neo-feudalism so that the top 1% controls 60, 70, 80, 90% of the global wealth.
I'm speaking with financial analyst and broadcast journalist Max Keiser. Today's show, Banks, Bailouts, and Manufactured Market Crashes. I'm Bonnie Faulkner. This is Guns and Butter. Yes, exactly. And the growing social unrest that you refer to, of course, we see massive demonstrations here in Europe. But now you are quoted as having said that coming unrest in the United States, assuming that that's going to happen, an insurrection, I believe, was the word you used. You see this as much more volatile and violent. Could you explain what your view of the U.S. is with what's happening there with regard to the impoverishment of most of the people there?
Well, for example, compared to France, there's an infrastructure of protest and manifestation. People are protesting and manifesting their demonstrations all the time. You know, every month somebody's on the street. He's trying to negotiate for better conditions or better wages. So the infrastructure is in place, and so there's a routine. You know, the cops come out, they stand along the road, the people protest, they strike, the metro stops working, and as a result, you know, the workers, the average folks here in France have been able to maintain a very high quality of life, very high standard of life, and the government lives in fear of the people. And the people like that, since going back to the days of the French Revolution and the Reign of Terror, which was a very potent demonstration of what the people feel when the potentates get a little bit too high and mighty. They simply cut their heads off. And it's very much alive on the streets here. If you take a taxi and you start to talk about, you know, the Reign of Terror, everyone is conversant in this and will tell you, yes, if they get out of hand, we will cut their heads off. So it's very much in the minds of the average person that their power, ultimately they have the power. Now in the States, the people live in fear of the government. So it's the complete opposite that you have in the States. There's no infrastructure of protest. There's no infrastructure of manifestation. The entire union system has been gutted. Wages are destroyed. People who actually fight for decent living are mocked and by the mainstream media, which of course is owned by the same corporations. And so therefore, when it's time to push back, as it always is, there's always a dynamism between the power and the powerless, the powerful and the powerless. There's always going to be conflicts. And in Europe, this dynamic is understood, and so the potential for really dangerous, violent confrontations is minimized because both sides understand their role. In the U.S., the powerful don't understand what they're doing, and the poor don't understand how to push back. So when the cyclical nature of this confrontation rears its head, the result will be a lot messier, a lot uglier, and so there'll be a lot more violent, just simply because they don't know how to do it. You know, the poor people don't know how to protest, and the rich people don't know how to be rich and to shut up when they should shut up. You know, the rich in America should shut up because going on television and talking about the glories of free market capitalism when all they are part of a corrupt oligarchic kleptocracy is only putting a big fat target on their back, and they should just shut up because you're only angering the people that you're abusing. And, it's not going to end well if you have to learn how to be rich. I mean, this is the thing about Americans, is it's a very young country. It's a very young aristocracy. The aristocracy in America is very new to the world, and they really don't know how to handle their wealth. So I predict that much of it will be taken away.
What about the current financial crisis in Ireland and the coming crises in Portugal, Spain, etc., where the governments are under incredible pressure to slash budgets and hand over assets like pension funds to foreign banks? For instance, you've described the IMF bailout of Ireland as Ireland bailing out the IMF. How do you mean that?
Well, the IMF is bankrupt. I was going to go belly up 3 or 4 years ago. They needed some crises to remain viable. And they are stealing money from Ireland. Ireland has 20 billion euros in cash on the books that they don't need a bailout. They can go fine for a couple of years without any problem at all. They have a big pension system, and the IMF is coming in there, and they're stealing their money. It's very similar back in the 80s during the period of the corporate raiders, when guys like Carl Icahn or Ivan Boesky, if you remember these names, they would do these corporate raids where they would borrow lots of money, take over a company, seize the pension assets, fire everybody, and cut themselves a big fat paycheck. Well, this is exactly what the IMF is doing to Ireland. They see pension funds, they see cash, they're borrowing lots of money. The IMF has no money. They're bankrupt. They're using borrowed money. Because the IMF is mostly the U.S. and the U.S. banks, and these banks are all bankrupt. To say that they can bail out anybody is ridiculous. They're simply using borrowed money to do a leveraged buyout of a country to steal the wealth, and then the population will be left footing the bill. Same thing in Greece. And Greece is really a tragic story because, of course, they should have never been in the euro to begin with, had it not been for Goldman Sachs cooking the books of Greece and to make it look like they had a better cash position than they did, and then they were let into the euro. Then, a few years later, because they don't really have the cash, they can't keep up with the rest of the eurozone, and they fall behind, so the jackals swoop in, and now they're turning Greece into a vassal state. A great place to park your yacht, but don't try to get any kind of civil rights or human rights in Greece. Same thing for now in Portugal, in Spain. Latvia was totally decimated. The same kind of things that the IMF was active doing in South America, Latin America for years, during the period where a lot of the leaders of those countries would fall out of airplanes and the IMF would come in. Argentina is a great example. I mean, Citigroup totally decimated that country as they convinced the government to put Citigroup's liabilities onto the government's balance sheet, and then they forced the people to pay off Citibank's loans. What a genius operation that was. So they're using this technique of the leveraged buyout to go into these countries that are sitting ducks, basically, and they're stealing all their wealth, and they're being successful, again, because people are not able to articulate the problem well enough to fight against it. The left, as it's called, is completely bamboozled by markets and finance. You ask your left-wing friends today a simple question. You say to them, ask 10 of your left-wing friends today, say, what is the relationship between interest rate and bond prices? Now, this is the most academic piece of financial knowledge that even a first-year high school economics person would know the answer to. But I guarantee you that if you ask 100 of your left-wing friends, not a single one will know the answer. That is a problem because they don't have any idea what they're fighting against. All they know is that they're upset about something, and then that's all they know. And it's not enough, and they're getting killed.
What are the prospects for a collapse of the euro and a breakup of the eurozone? We are now beginning to hear this yet again.
I call it Germany 4.0, which is a new tech way of saying the Fourth Reich. This crisis is playing into Germany's hands. Remember, after World War II, Germany was split up and never to be raised again. Then, under the creation of the euro, they said, well, you can reunify East and West Germany again, but it'll be diffused under the rubric of the euro. Well, now that the euro is breaking apart, and Germany will break away, It'll have a reunified country, its own central bank, the Bundesbank, which is essentially the same as the European Central Bank, and it'll be the second